Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am the Darklight Emissary, and this episode is on a couple of the best authors, in my opinion, for the Warhammer 40k setting, for best books as well. And so this isn't going to be like tiering them. I tend to think that most of the authors I have read in Warhammer are all pretty good at the baseline and very good at the top, especially for some of the specific books some of them have written. And so probably who I will put at the top of my list for this episode is probably Dan Abnett, which for many of you will probably come at no surprise. Dan is by far one of the longest running writers for the series, and I first read one of his books nearly 20 years ago, and that was the Eisenhorn trilogy of novels, and I can still recommend them to you, whether you are a veteran to the setting and just have never really gotten into the books, or you are new and somehow stumbled upon this channel and this video. I can recommend Eisenhorn as a gateway book to the setting as a whole. That's how foundational of a book Dan Abnett made for the entire franchise, for the entire setting. Now, one of the things that makes Dan Abnett stand out from the other authors, and there's many in the Black Library, is that Dan does a great job at weaving together a great story mixed with just amazing character development. He does a great job at creating an environment for characters to flourish in and make it seem like characters aren't just puppets at the behest of the author. He imbues them with a high level of personality that you can see through his descriptive writing. And not all of his writing is gigantic climactic battles. A lot of what Dan Abnett does well is actually stopping the action a bit and giving us a closer look at some of the places that these characters live in and how they interact with each other on kind of a slice of life level. You know, not, we need to go save the entire universe from this epic craziness. That's in there too a lot of the time in his novels. But it's often more about learning about these characters over the long term, and many of his book series have been going on in Warhammer for decades at this point. And so Eisenhorn is probably one of his best. Another group of books that are great from him along this style are Gaunt's Ghosts, the Tanith First and Only, about an Imperial Guard regiment called the Ghosts, and their commander, Ibram Gaunt, who is a interesting character. But he is by far not the only character that gets very well developed. And that's one of the best things about his books, is you might have a favorite character from Dan Abnett, but they are not going to be the only character with a lot of work put into that character. And so I can safely recommend Dan Abnett at the top of my list for one of the best authors in the franchise, and one of my favorites and ones I've read ever since I was a young teenager to now in my 30s. So along with him comes just a lot of getting to know a lot of different characters and their motivations. And he is currently slated to be releasing the last couple of books to finish up the Horus Heresy series of novels, which has been going on for over a decade now. So we were going to see The End and the Death, part 1 and 2. And so Dan Abnett has the honor of writing us the ending to what really happened to the Emperor in writing against Horus in that final showdown that many of us have read for so long in the background of the lore for the novels. And so again, highly recommend him. And if you've never read anything from him, start with Eisenhorn or probably the Gaunt's Ghosts novels. But you won't be disappointed with anything from Dan Abnett. Next for me is Graham McNeil. So Graham McNeil is another author to me that is foundational for Warhammer. I started reading his books early on as well. He has the Ultramarines Omnibus as some books he wrote way back, and I can also recommend them as kind of a beginning point into the series, into the novels themselves. Now, Graham McNeil has some great character work. He is the main author behind one of my favorite characters and legions, which is Magnus the Red and the Thousand Suns Legion of Space Marines. So already just there, I've loved his work in those novels. But he had me going way back with the Ultramarines Omnibus, Storm of Iron, and a few others way back. And one of the main things that Graham McNeil does really well for me is he explains the overall environment that characters are in super well compared to nearly any other author. One of my biggest pet peeves when reading a book is when an author is so focused on the dialogue between characters, we have no idea what room they're meeting in or what the planet looks like they're on. Sometimes authors completely forget that. And I mean, if the point is just to learn about the characters themselves, I can accept it, but I like to have a sense of place when I'm reading. And Graham McNeil paints a perfect picture of what's going on in his novels. And I really, really love that about his novels. I can still picture scenes from books I haven't read for many years from his books. An example of that, in the Ultramarines Omnibus, there's a book called Dead Sky Black Sun, which takes place on the demon world of Medrengard, which is the homeworld of the Iron Warriors Legion of Chaos Marines. And he just explains so well just how dismal this place is. Just the sky seems to hate the characters as they're walking on the ground with the sun that looks like a sucking black hole in the sky. He explains the city that Perturabo is said to live in and how it's this grand cathedral to hate with endless industry seemingly going on in it. And they only see it from a distance. They don't go there. But then he explains this titanic battle taking place at this Iron Warriors fortress where there's an assault by 100 dreadnoughts. And why that's going on, there's two titans fighting right overhead of them with chain fists whirling and buzzing and smashing into each other. And while that's going on, another thing's going on, and he just paints the environment so perfectly. He did the book Fulgrim, and he explains so well what the world layer looks like, which had these gigantic hovering cities of coral, and so over an ocean world, and just I can still picture what that world looks like in my mind. I can still picture what the Drop Site Massacre looks like from his descriptions of how that battle took place, of a Marine throwing his helmet up in the air, and so many bullets were going overhead, so many bolter rounds from so many Space Marines firing at each other, that the helmet simply got bounced around in the air and never touched the ground, as far as that Space Marine could tell. Just things like that he just does such a great job at explaining. He doesn't do quite as well on the character standpoint to me as Dan Abnett does, but in my opinion, these two are some of the best authors. And Graham McNeil has not been quite as active in Warhammer anymore because he did start working for Riot Games, League of Legends fame. So I think he's helping to build the lore there for their upcoming MMO and a few other games there. But he still occasionally comes back and writes for Magnus the Red, specifically in the Thousand Suns a lot. And again, he's been one of those authors that I've really loved to get to know his style over the years, and I can highly recommend any of his books to you if you have not read them. And then to round this out with a third one today will be Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Aaron is a bit of a newer author compared to the other ones, as far as I can tell. I don't remember him in the older days, and I didn't look up when he started writing for Warhammer, but distinctly one of the books I do remember reading from him first was The First Heretic. And this book is in the Horse Heresy series and follows the word bearers fall to chaos first, with Lorgar and Erebus and Orpharon and all that. And from then on, Aaron has been kind of considered one of the top authors for the setting, I feel like. Everyone pretty much loved the first Heretic that's read it. What Aaron does best is he tends to write for chaos characters. And it's way too easy to write a chaos character as one-dimensional. You know, they're evil, mwahaha, laughing, skulls on their armor, and and spikes all around it. Like, you can make a very nefariously silly character out of chaos characters usually. But Aaron decided that he was going to add a lot more character to these characters, make them a lot more than just two-dimensional or one-dimensional punching bags for loyalists. And he's taken that torch and ran with it. The first Heretic did a great job of that, because we're following the characters that basically start the entire Horus Heresy series, and Aaron makes you question whether they were wrong in doing that or not. Like, he does not just say, hey, Lorgar was evil and twisting a mustache when he decided to turn against the Emperor. He makes it quite the quandary that Lorgar was presented with. He doesn't make it an easy decision. And then likewise, Argal Tal is probably one of the most beloved characters in the entire Horus Heresy saga, because Argal Tal is one of the first Zest Space Marines, but he is very conflicted about his role within Lorgar's plan. He doesn't really want to betray his brothers in the other legions. He's kind of a very, a very reluctant villain character that makes sense when you learn more about him. And I love the descriptions that Aaron gives of like Argal Tal's personal musings and feelings on something. And I haven't read all of his works yet. He's done the Black Legion books, which is also, about the Black Legion, Chaos Legion, and Modern 40k. He also did the Night Lords trilogy, and that has been greatly praised by anyone I've ever seen talk about it, and I have not read those ones yet. So I definitely look forward to reading more of Aaron's works, and I can definitely recommend his as well. Now, beyond these three authors, there's definitely quite a few more out there. I'm not going to go over them in this one. This is just meant to be a brief overview on my top three and why, and a few of their books that I can recommend. Authors like John French, James Swallow, and even one other one I'll bring up that's foundational to me was Ben Counter. As far as I know, he has not written for Warhammer in a very long time. But if you want to see some older styling, some older feel to the setting when it was a bit more grim and a bit more just a bit more there. It feels like in later books that have come out, Warhammer's still great fun, and there's a lot of great battles and descriptions of battles and character work being done. But those early Ben Counter books were like a grim Warhammer setting that has almost been lost over time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's still just interesting to note that if you read a Ben Counter novel, he did the Grey Knights novels originally. He did a book called Demon World, which, if you want to just see an off-the-wall, crazy book about, chaos forces fighting each other on a demon world in the Eye of Terror, I recommend Demon World from him. And one of the first trilogies I read was the Soul Drinkers Omnibus, about the Soul Drinkers chapter of Space Marines, which are a unique take on Renegade Space Marines that Ben Counter did as well. So he's kind of a fourth I can recommend in terms of someone foundational to my beginning knowledge of this setting, and a look into some of the darker, grittier parts of the setting that were more prominent in books back when he started writing them. It's some of that's in Graham McNeil as well as Dan Abnett's foundational stuff, but they did a better job, I guess, at not focusing so much on that. But it doesn't make Ben Counter's writing worse for that, but it's a little more simplistic and straightforward and to the point on its battles and fighting and the kind of culture it represents the Imperium with is much more in line with, I guess, a stereotypical view of it. But again, not done in a bad way. And I can still recommend his stuff if you want to see some older flavoring to the setting as a whole. So, and that's really it for now on this one. I don't want to ramble on and on in this. I just wanted to give a recommendation on a few of the authors that I really like and grew up with, and hope you can get some joy out of them too. Please leave in your comment who your favorite authors are and why, what your favorite book is in this setting, or books. I'd love to chat with you about that. And as always, bring your light into the dark places, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you and have a great day or night wherever you are. Thank you.